We have with us Rob Crooks, who is associated with the British Columbia chapter of the Communist Party of Canada. We are having this very important conversation on Zohran Mamdani and the promise that he is offering to America, an America that is struggling under the slowing economy, where the cost of living is going up, and where political rights are now being challenged and even threatened under this presidency of Donald Trump, who seems to stand against even principles, some would say, the principles on which the United States was founded. Rob Crooks has joined us. Let's hear from him. Rob, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Zohran Mamdani is creating waves across the globe because he is standing in opposition to everything that Trumpian America stands for. He is an immigrant, born to immigrant parents. He was born in Uganda and then migrated to the United States, obtained his citizenship a few years ago. And he's a Muslim, a very visible Muslim, and he talks about all those things that are considered to be hush-hush nowadays because, well, they will create enemies for you. He doesn't seem to be bothered. Why do you think that is happening?
Well, I think that, the sort of position that's being put out by the Trump administration is not the general position of people living in America, especially people living in New York City, where Zohran is running to be mayor. New York City is a very multicultural city. And so, I think that people relate to Zohran more so because of that. And I think you're seeing that across North America, including in Canada, where younger people are much more comfortable in multicultural settings, and they're not interested in this sort of vision of America that the mega types are pushing.
So he is challenging the status quo. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, definitely. And I think, it's not just about his identity, but it's about his policies. I mean, his policies, if he wins and if his policies are implemented, then they will make a big change for people living in the city of New York. And he has a lot of policies that would be useful to have in a city like Vancouver as well.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that. How do you think British Columbia's politics might be influenced by something like that happening in New York, with him promising free transit and free childcare and community-run, city-run grocery chains? So how feasible do you think that is?
I think it's very feasible. And I think that it's something that we should definitely be looking into for Vancouver as well. I mean, we've seen the prices of our groceries go up so high, especially during the pandemic, and they haven't really come back down. We've seen the owners of the grocery chains sort of be put on, be sort of scolded by a government, a government table, but it hasn't really affected the prices. There's been no better outcome out of that. So I think that we need to be looking at these types of things in Vancouver too, because people are struggling with the cost of living, and now we have a Liberal government that's who's talking about cutting social services that a lot of people rely on. So I think that even though Zohran's ideas may seem sort of out of left field, they're really not that different than the types of policies that we would have been talking about in Canada or the United States 40 or 50 years ago.
Because he talks about taxing high-income households as well as big corporations. So he talks about a wealth tax, a hefty one. You can't tax everyone the same way. And that gives a lot of people creeps, especially people who own big businesses. And over here in Canada, we've recently heard the new BC Green Party leader talk similar things about taxing high-income households more than others. And then that is making a lot of people uncomfortable. So do you think that sort of a politics has currency in at least in Metro Vancouver?
I think it does. I think that there are a lot of people, like I said, struggling in Vancouver. And in fact, I think it's the majority of people who are struggling to get by, who are struggling to pay rent, to buy groceries, and to pay for childcare and things like that. And and taxing people of higher income, that's just something that's more. It's a fair policy because people make money off other people's labor. So this is things that we all contribute to together, and so we should all be contributing back to society to make sure that especially the most vulnerable can have some sort of quality of life.
Zohran Mamdani also represents the promise that America stands for, right? Like it's a land of hope and opportunity. Everyone who comes from outside eventually gets to make a future. But he doesn't want to be, and people like him because he's also inspiring a lot of other people. I see reels on social media where there was a model minority myth that was created in North America, that immigrant communities, especially people of color, they remain quiet. They don't really challenge the dominant narrative. So that they can just get by and do their own stuff. But Zohran Mamdani has challenged that as well, that if we are people of color, that does not mean that we are not equal participants in this whole nation-building enterprise. Therefore, we need to be heard. And that is also inspiring people to open up. Do you think something like that can happen over here?
Certainly from my experience, I see a lot of racialized people and people, newcomers, first and second generation people to Canada who are very invested in politics and invested in left-wing politics. And I think that that's not uncommon for Canada. We've always been a place where people who have been coming from other parts around the world, and they bring leftist politics with them. And I think that's part of what has made Canada what it is today in terms of having, a strong social safety net, which is being eroded. But we used to have a very strong social safety net, and things like health care and things like that. These are things that people stood up for because they weren't afraid to stand up for them, and they faced those potential consequences, but. There's always going to be potential bad consequences in fighting for anything that matters.
And I want to ask you, how is the Communist Party looking at this? Because every time you talk about, because these have been Communist Party talking points for a long time now. But somehow Social Democrats, at least the Scandinavian Social Democrats, they have always been okay with capitalism. Democratic Socialists also now, it seems, Mamdani is not talking about dismantling this whole system. He's in fact talking about a middle path, sort of. So how does the Communist Party read all this? Do you think this is the way forward for you? Or do you think that he's just doing barely enough, but he needs to do more?
Well, I think Zohran is doing... he hasn't become mayor yet, so we'll see what he does when he becomes mayor, and I do hope he does win. But you're right. I mean, our view as the Communist Party is that we need a different system. Capitalism can't support everybody, and it can't really give back to society the things that people need. So we do need to overthrow. We need a different system. But I think that Zohran getting if he's able to secure that role as mayor, then he will open up a much wider spectrum for politics, because it feels like the spectrum in politics has been very narrowed, and it's been very much pushed to the right. So someone like a social democrat can sort of push and open up some room on the left. That's very good for us. And our position as the Communist Party of Canada isn't that our positions are the only ones that matter. We believe in democracy, so we want everybody to be able to contribute what they believe and to contribute their views. And we want to work together with people who are progressive and people on the left, whether they're democratic socialists or whether they're more progressive liberals. I think that there's a room for a coalition on the left to really make change. And I think that's the way forward.
Mamdani also talks about an important thing, which is city-run grocery stores. And I thought this was very important because Corbyn in the UK, when he was the leader of the Labour Party, he was talking about something similar. In fact, he was talking about giving public ownership or ownership to the employees of companies that are not making profits, that don't sell them off to a bigger capitalist. Let the owners or let the workers take ownership and let them revive these companies. There are some models that are available in Europe, but it's still not a very widely held view that something like this could work. Do you think something like that can happen over here?
Absolutely, and it's happened in the past. I'm originally from Winnipeg, and in the north end of Winnipeg, there used to be the co-op grocery stores that was owned partly by the workers and partly by the people who shop there. I also used to shop at a grocery store that was completely owned by the people who worked there. And so it certainly can work, but I'd also like to see something that was owned by the government, because the government has the power to really, get those bulk level of foodstuffs they need to get onto the shelves and to keep the prices down, which is what's really important. I think we need to make sure that the prices of groceries are coming down, to bring down inflation and to make them more affordable for the regular person and for the regular family. I have to say that the one grocery store I shopped at in Winnipeg that was owned by the workers, it was a great grocery store, but it was expensive. And I think you need to do that on a much larger scale, on a scale that the government could do if we want to make sure that the groceries are affordable.
That can also lead to this big government issue, don't you think, where across the world they are saying that the governments need to downsize, you need to get less involved in business. What you are proposing, what you're saying, could mean that the government gets bigger in size, where it is involved in almost everything. And there is some apprehension in some quarters that governments getting involved in business is actually bad news. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a healthy mistrust of the government in this country, and I think for good reason. But I think that the government, this idea of that the government we need a smaller government. The government is already very large. The government is already doing things that affect our lives on a daily basis. So we're talking about, instead of the government putting all of our tax money into buying war materials and things like that, or giving subsidies to resource extraction companies, or bailing out this company or that company, instead of bailing out these companies, why don't we take them over to ensure that we have jobs and to ensure that we have affordability? And I don't think this is just for grocery stores. I think we should be able to have this for the auto industry. I mean, look at all the jobs that we're losing in the auto industry because they're American owned. Now, if the Canadian government owned that, we could ensure that we were making cars for Canadians, and we could ensure that we had jobs. Now, I think if we did have a government run grocery store, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be private grocery stores. You can have government run and private grocery stores existing together. But I think also having the government run grocery store that can keep the costs down, keep the prices low, that will also be competition for the private grocers, and they will have to keep their prices down as well. So I don't think it's one or the other.
Before I let you go, one final question. Do you think, should Mamdani win in New York, do you think that is going to be a shot in the arm for left politics across North America?
I think it will. I don't think we should, he's not going to change the world, and it's not going to be, he's not even necessarily going to change America if he wins, but I think he will make a big impact, and I think it will be important, and I think it will give a shot in the arm, as you say, to leftist movements. And like I was saying earlier, I hope that it sort of opens up the spectrum more so on the left of what's considered acceptable political talking points and political policy, both in the United States and in Canada.
Rob, it was a delightful conversation that I had with you. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.